Welcome to another episode of Get Paid for Your Pad. Today, I have a special guest on the show, Mr. Peter Shull. He's the Business Development Director of Patriot Family Homes. They have over 200 units under management, so very, very sizable and successful company. And we're going to talk about how to market to military families on Airbnb, which is how Patriot Family Homes got started. They've now expanded, but yeah, we get all into that. But Peter, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited. And just like to say thank you for what you're doing for folks out there who are trying to get into this industry and understand how to, market their own home and get things started.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to learn about your business because I think it's a really interesting niche, marketing to military families. You guys are helping a lot of military personnel who own homes to manage those on Airbnb, and you've grown to over 200 units. So that's a sizable organization. But let's go back to when you guys got started. Like, how did you get into the military family niche?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's it is a really interesting story. It didn't start with me. It actually started with while I was on active duty, there was a young man named Joe Riley that used to work with me. And he started off with his own home. And of course, we lived around a military base there. And he had a very lovely wife and very forgiving wife who was willing to kind of work with him on this endeavor. But they ended up using their own home. They started off with one bedroom, but then grew into using their own home to rent it out in a military market. And he grew from that one bedroom to then going to his own home and then determining that there was a huge requirement in and around military bases for short-term rentals. And from there, he grew to 20. And then the next year, he grew to 50. And then this year, which is our third year, he's grown to over 200 doors under management. And we're looking to put another 300 or up to 330 in service within the next couple of months. So,
Wow.
For any of your viewers out there who are like, well, I don't know if I can do this. I tell you, it is very possible. I was kind of watching this young man on this endeavor. I wasn't completely sold on the idea myself. I didn't think that he was going to be able to do it, but there is such a strong requirement for short-term rentals. And as you well know, the returns are double to triple of what you can get on long terms. And that really helps you, capitalize very quickly and then use smart leverage to grow. So that's really where it started. I would add to it that, in the military market that we were in, the CEO, Joe Riley, happened to be at a certain post where we had a lot of graduation ceremonies for initial entry into the military. So there was a lot of, friends and family that wanted to come and visit the graduation ceremony. So that kind of added to, the requirement for those short-term rentals in Columbus, Georgia.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the special needs or specific needs of this guest avatar?
Yeah, well, I don't know that there's necessarily, a significant departure from what you're going to face in other markets. But I think the thing that made us kind of, a little bit uniquely, able to interact with the guests is that, we're all veterans ourselves, or we employ predominantly spouses of veterans. So they kind of understand the lifestyle. They understand the speak, if you will, the jargon that comes with working inside of the military. And I think that actually, allowed the interaction with the guests to be much more free flowing and a little bit more inviting, I would say. The other thing is, I think that there's a certain level of empathy that comes with our team being predominantly military, to understand, what it means to come and move, see your loved one graduating from the military, but also just in general, being very nomadic ourselves in the military. I mean, we move around every 1 to 2 years. And so, there's a lot of understanding with our team and, what it's like to be away from home and kind of want some of those amenities and whatnot to
Yeah.
to be able to be comfortable while you're away.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me, I interviewed somebody who told me that over 80% of people in the US prefer to do business with a business or a person that shares their values.
Right.
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 So
Yeah. And I'll tell you that, one of the things why I decided to ultimately come and work with Joe Riley and the greater team is because, they, I feel as though I'm plugging right into, what I left in the military. And it does, I think, to your point, goes back to those, those shared values and, the ability to kind of trust a little bit more readily as you come into that environment. Right.
yeah. So one thing I'd love to talk about is, since you guys have grown so large and you're finding new properties all the time, that's a challenge that a lot of our listeners have as they want to grow, but they don't know how to find new properties. So I'd love to pick your brain a bit. Like, what's your strategy when it comes to business development? Like, how do you find these new units?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is cold calling. We employ a lot of, we just reach out and we find agents who are willing to work with us in these various markets that we're either in or we want to go into. We establish that relationship and, we work with them to send us leads, and it's worked out very, very well. I would also kind of plug in there that we provide a service for those that want to put their homes into management with us, free of charge, as we're going out and we're finding homes as we put them under contract. If we have the right paperwork from clients, we can go ahead and we can pass those properties to our clients if they choose to do that. But in terms of, like, our strategy has not been to rush into those, the traditional vacation markets, right? We've kind of found this niche for what we call the utility property. So we're going into probably, a lot of markets that people wouldn't think to go into, like Columbus, Georgia, to start with, Athens, Georgia, Mobile, Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama, Huntsville, Luray, Virginia. We've gone into a lot of these areas, Columbia, South Carolina, places where, folks would think that maybe there isn't as strong a requirement for the short-term rentals, but we've found that is just simply not true. There is a strong trend toward this sort of, kind of traveling. I mean, it's not just in vacation markets. I think people desire to be able to pull up into a driveway, not have to walk by checkout or check in, and, immediately go into their home and have those amenities immediately available. So that they can start plugging in. I also think that, the other piece to that is that, potentially, as more and more people are working from home, as they go out on the road, they can take work with them. So there's a strong requirement. And I guess, to kind of wrap it up, I would say that, we aren't just focused in the larger markets. We're looking in those smaller niche markets, right? Of course, and I think you've covered this probably in previous podcasts and in your book. One of the first things that we generally look for is the neighborhood. We don't want it to be, too nice, if you will. We don't want it to be in a bad area. But then we also look for, those traditional things like off street parking. Does it have a fenced backyard? Because if you think about it, a lot of folks who are traveling and on the road may want to bring their pet with them, or their children, and they want to be able to let them go out in an environment where they don't have to be watched as closely, and a fenced backyard would do that. And then inside the home, we're looking for areas, that people can gather. Large living rooms are kind of nice. More bathrooms, higher ratio of bathrooms to bedrooms are good too. And so those are the sorts of things that we're kind of looking for as we go in, and we're trying to find homes that we think will perform well.
Yeah. Yeah. You make a really good point, because people tend to think that Airbnb can only be strong in either the big cities or, catering to tourists in traditional vacation rental markets. But there's a wide range of reasons why people stay at Airbnbs, right? It could be like
Absolutely
construction workers, like
Yeah.
travel nurses, like there's so many different reasons why people travel or move. And especially now, and you mentioned this, now that people are so flexible when it comes to their location, I think you're right on. Like those markets are going to do really well. And the other side of that story is you're probably not going to have as many challenges when it comes to regulations. And number two, your competitors might not be as professional as well in those markets, I imagine.
Right. Right. Yeah, great points. One I want to circle back to, you mentioned the construction worker. We do get a lot of folks who are, on contracts and just going into a city for a particular job, and then they're going to be gone. And it's so much more convenient for them to, again, pull up into a driveway and immediately go into their home, get done what they have to do, and then depart. But have you ever been to a hotel late at night as you're trying to check in, and you'll notice that there's a lot of different types of construction workers that are staying at those hotels. It used to amaze me how quickly the parking lots fill up at that that magic time of about 7 p.m. at night, and then in the morning they're gone. They're back out and they're on the road. So yeah, there's all kinds of reasons. I would say too, Jasper, what we've realized is that the requirement across the board for short-term rentals is huge. And I don't think that it's not getting smaller. I think it's getting bigger, right? The challenges in that, for us at least, is inventory. There simply isn't. I mean, we would buy more homes if we could, but right now, there just isn't the inventory in the areas that we need it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is your model to find people who want to buy a home and then help them with the purchase, and then include the Airbnb's management service in that deal?
We do provide that. We can do that. And let me step back, in terms of the evolution of the company. It started off with all owned properties. And then when we couldn't find as much capital, then we started looking for rental arbitrage. Okay. Which, I think most folks understand that, but that's simply going out, finding a landlord that is okay with you subleasing it as a short-term rental. And then as we started to do that, we brought on quite a few of those sorts of properties, but then the landlord started coming back to us saying, well, why don't you just manage the property for us? Mm-hmm. And so that's how we spun off into the management. And now as we've been going, just over a year on the management side, we've got a lot of, the original clients that have been cash flowing their home. They can show that as income now, very strong income. They can go back now and they can get additional leverage, and they're interested in finding another home. The great thing about working with us is that, again, a lot of our clients are predominantly military. So it's, naturally we kind of plug in and go back to that shared value sort of thing. But the ability to, we're going out and we're buying the homes, and then we're putting them under contract as though we're going to purchase them. And so it becomes an opportunity for our managed clients to come on board and take those properties to closing. Okay. There's a lot of, paperwork. Not a lot, but there's paperwork we need to do, ahead of time, proof of funds and those sorts of things to be able to pass off those properties rapidly. But yeah, that is a part of our model. That is something that we're growing toward. And the other aspect of this that I would encourage, and you may even, I don't know if you've done a podcast on it, but the tax benefits of the short-term rentals, that is huge, and that is something that we're starting to learn a lot about. We just recently helped an investor who went through a liquidity event, and through cost segregation studies and all of this, potentially will pay no taxes on those capital gains for this year. So that's something else we want to be able to offer in the future as an opportunity.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. That would be a whole new podcast.
Oh yeah, right. maybe a whole branch and sequence of podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to dive a little bit into the actual management of all these units, because when you have over 200 units, I imagine you guys have your systems dialed in. I guess you have your teams dialed in. Can you touch a little bit on like how do you manage that many units as a business?
Right. So the way that I would break it down is into two parts. And you've got the digital side, and I'd really probably put our communications in there as well. And then you've got what I just simply call the ground game, your operations, where the rubber meets the road, which is I look at those two, your digital and then your ground team. I would say that ultimately, satisfaction from the guest is going to be determined by your ground team. And just to add a little bit more, fidelity to that, your ground team is really your market manager, if you will, your GM, or someone that you have on the ground that's providing overall supervision. And then you have your housekeepers. Next to that, you have your folks, groundskeeper, lawn care. Beyond that, now you're starting to talk about potentially handyman. And then you start getting into your technicians, your HVAC, your plumbing, your electrical. Okay. As we are, we're still developing that side, as the market grows, we're growing with that, and we're starting to, develop and get better and stronger at those processes. But that is, for me, it's a less controlled environment, and it's much more difficult when you're talking, at the scale that we are. Even if you just look at one particular market, let alone adding, we're at 25 plus markets right now. So we have an operations director who is overall looking at this and kind of, trying different systems and different models. Some of the things that we have recently tried implementing is, with our housekeepers, finding, maybe a ratio for our housekeeper to the number of homes that we have under management. We're also noticing that, there's a system and procedure for owned homes, because you can move much more quickly. And then there's a system and procedure for managed homes, where, now you have a property owner, and there needs to be potentially some interaction, especially when you're talking about the plumber and the, HVAC. There's got to be interaction in working with your property owners to make sure that, things are being done in the way that the property owner wants them, not necessarily that you would do them. So yeah, it is definitely more challenging with the ground game. On the digital side, I'm very proud of what our team has done. There's a whole host of different software platforms that we've brought to bear to the problem of managing homes. Everything from Expensify, Exemplify, Bill.com, our Guesty. We use Guesty platform as a free plug for them as well. And then, we use a pricing software as well. And then, I also kind of like on our digital side, our guest communications is kind of where I put that as well, because that's something that we can centrally manage. And I would tell you of all the things that I think is important in anyone's operation, the guest interaction is kind of a make or break. And, I don't know what your opinion on that is, but just in my short term of watching things unfold in terms of the guest interaction, I would tell you this: you could have the most beautiful home in the world, and if the guest interaction is fumbled and not done properly, you will get a 1-star review. Yeah. That is just it. So what's beautiful about the operation that we have is, again, we're employing a lot of military spouses who, just bring a tremendous amount of talent to this operation. And, they're very articulate individuals. They're very empathetic. Again, they've lived the nomadic lifestyle, so they know what it's like to, do a permanent change of station and have to go and live like that. So they're just phenomenal at engaging with a guest who is potentially not very happy and turning that situation around. And so on the flip side of, hey, you can have the best home, you can also have a home that's okay, maybe not great, maybe a utility property. And if your guest engagement is on target, you're going to get a 5-star review, and you'll get a 5-star review every single time. I've noticed that some of our market managers who do better than others, it's not really dependent upon the actual properties themselves, but it's dependent upon the interaction of that market manager with those guests.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's probably a nugget right there.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. The way I like to think about it is you wouldn't leave a bad review for a friend. So if you're making friends with your guests, then that's
right.
They're going to be forgiving, right?
And oh, by the way, don't wait until the end of the stay to make that friendship. Our guest communication works with, we have live interaction. We do have some embedded messaging that goes out through text. But we do have our communication folks. If there's going to be an issue at the home and we know that ahead of time, our team is going to reach out to that guest and say, hey, we had a small issue. We're still working through it right now. We hope it's not an inconvenience, so on and so forth. And then also too, with market managers potentially checking in with guests, maybe even in homes, you're prioritizing. We've got some markets, we've got up to 30 homes. If they're prioritizing those engagements in the areas where they think they might have some issues, it's always good to kind of check in and make sure that everything's going, even if it's not in person, even if it's just a quick text to say, hey, how is your stay? Because that at least gives the guest an opportunity to engage and say, hey, this is my issue. And then that turns into an opportunity for you. Because if you can take that issue, you can quickly remedy it. It's as though it never even happened. In fact, it may take you from, a 3-star to a 5-star.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Like you don't want to hear about the feedback in the reviews. You want to hear it while they're still staying there, so you can.
Right.
And yeah, 100%, on point. Last thing I want to touch on is, I like how you broke down the operations, right, with the on the ground versus the online part. What I'm thinking is you're in 25 markets, right? I understand that, like, if you have like 10 or 15 homes, you can have your in-house cleaners, and you can have your handyman and all those people. But how do you move into a new market? Let's say you only have like 1 or 2 properties there. Like, how do you manage that when you're still small in a market?
Yeah. So I guess a short answer is carefully, right? So, but really the way that we've approached it is we've understood that, we have an operations department, we have a business development. Business development really is engaging with potential clients, bringing them on board, and then handing them off to the operations, right? When we're talking about a new market, though, I become responsible for that because it is such a small market. It has to be set up and, and created by the business development side of the house. So, I'm pulling and drawing off of a lot of my colleagues to help with this. But the expectation is until it reaches a certain level, maybe 5 to 10 homes, really it's going to be in business development. And so from, span of control, I'm really not trying to create more than maybe 2 or 3 new markets at a time. So until those kind of, or we decide that, hey, look, this market probably isn't going to work out. We may decide to hand that off, conclude and separate. Or we're successful and we're adding additional managed clients there, and then we can do a warm handoff to our operations. That is kind of what we've come to in terms of how we're going to enter into the market. But again, I'll go back to the requirement out there is just through the roof. I mean, people are traveling and they're looking for Airbnbs everywhere. And so number one is it available, right? And if it's not available in that market, then it may be somewhere that, you want to try it out and see what happens. But if you're, and looking through it, from someone who's just starting out, I would say that it's got to, maybe even, the way that Joe Riley started his company, he used his own home to test the market out. And then once he got that market feedback that was overwhelming, I mean, he wanted to try to do long-term, but the requirement for short, he couldn't get people to stop asking about short-term rentals. And I think that, if you're able to go in and kind of test the market out, so to speak, then you can figure out what the revenues look like. And then from there, you can decide how much capital you want to kind of put into that particular market. Mm-hmm. But the toughest part of any market is always going to be, as we look at the two parts there, the digital or the online and the ground game, it's always going to be the ground game. Yep. Finding good quality, dependable people that you can trust.
Yeah, 100% right. And so what's your number one tip for people who are listening and they want to move into a new market? Like how do you find that qualified staff members in the new market?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think there's going to be a lot of trial and error, but I would tell you that you need to do personal interviews, and the interview is where it's going to happen. And then I would also encourage, if it's, just you and your wife that are trying it out, interview them separately. Ask them a whole host of questions. Don't bias one another. Interview 2, 3, 4 people, and then maybe you bring in a third person as kind of the tiebreaker. Have them all kind of do interviews, and then based upon that, make your selection. And then at the end of the day, you've got a short list of other qualified candidates that you can move to, right? I think that the other difficult part that you're going to need to figure out is, how are you going to payroll? How are you going to, implement, because a lot of people who are working for minimum wage, which is, what you'd be employing labor force, they can't wait. So you're going to have to figure out a system for immediate payment. Maybe as a smaller, more agile organization, that's easier, but certainly when you grow to our scale, it becomes more complicated. That would definitely be something. I mean, ultimately people are coming there to get compensated. So you're going to have to think through that. And that's certainly something that you don't want to mess up. And then also, just, I guess, to add to that, when you do hire someone that is good, you've got to think about how are you incentivizing them to do great work and to continue to do great work, because it's going to get monotonous. I think that, you've got to learn how to get buy-in from them. Maybe you're going to grow the operation, and hopefully you can get to 2 homes. And if you can get this one to cash flow, we can get a second home, and we'll bring you on for that one as well. And then you also have to make them feel a part of the team. When they give you feedback, you have got to listen. And then, to the best of your ability, you've got to take action. And it's little things like, if they come to you 2 or 3 times and they're telling you about, the broken door or whatever the case may be, the maintenance fault that they keep identifying to you, and you're not doing anything about it, that is, that's not going to serve you well, and it won't incentivize them. They want to know that they're a part of something that's moving forward. Okay, not something that's just cash flowing to someone else's pocket.
Yeah, that's great advice. I want to show you a book. I'm curious if you've read it. It's right behind me. It's actually
It was behind you.
It was behind me. It is now here. Have you read this book?
I have not read that one. Now I'm from I was in the Army, so it'd be a little bit difficult for me to pick up a book written by a Navy SEAL. But no, I have heard some good things about it.
Yeah, this is what I think. This is one of my favorite books, Extreme Ownership. For the people that are listening and not watching the YouTube video, I just picked up my copy of Extreme Ownership. And if you've been on our email list, then you've probably heard us talk about it. But this has been one of the biggest, the most impactful books that I've read when it comes to business. I'm not familiar with the military so much because I'm from Holland.
Right.
And, I mean,
right.
We might have like 1 plane and 2 tanks.
It's okay. That's okay.
We just hope that nobody messes with us. And if they do, we just hope that you guys come and save us.
Right,
You've
right.
done some once at least. But yeah, I think that book is. I was just curious if you read it because that's had a massive impact on our business and the way we run it and the way we take responsibility for
Mhm.
the work that we're doing. And yeah, so great book. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, being in the military, it's kind of a petri dish of leadership, right? Because you're given, plenty of opportunity to fail. I hate to say it like that, but through growing up in the military, you're given leadership positions, time and time again, and opportunities to go out and do great things. And it's amazing some of the people that I've worked with and served with, and how they've matured over the years into just incredibly high performing people, because they've just continued to keep at it. And uh, the leadership lessons that I've learned in 28 years of military experience, I'll take with me for the rest of my life. I hope they serve me well. I think they will. I think they translate very well into business. I think, even just like one of the things that we were just kind of touching on right there about, how do you motivate and find good quality people? Well, one of the things that I've learned in the military is that unless you give someone like complete ownership of a problem, you will not get innovation, right? And that is so easy to say, but hard to do in practice, especially when it's your operation. And now you're kind of abdicating kind of, running of the house or how the house is taken care of or whatever the case may be. But you might be surprised that over time you end up developing, someone that's working with you, that turns into be a high performing individual and thinks through problems and solves them much better than you ever would have, especially as your operation starts to grow.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's really interesting to chat with you. And before we wrap up, would you let the people that are listening know where they can find your homes, and also
Yeah.
for property owners who might be interested in working with you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would be a great, as you think about someone who's coming in for the first time, you don't have a whole lot of money to get started. So you probably want to run the business yourself, right? You want to try to maximize your returns. And then as you grow, you may not want to quite deal with all the hassles that comes from, so, I think we'd be a good option there. We are as far west as Texas. We're in San Antonio. We are in the Dallas area. We haven't purchased any homes or started, but we have folks that are in Dallas. We're in Jackson, Mississippi. We are in Mobile, Alabama, all through Alabama, all through Georgia. We are in North Carolina. We go as far up as the Poconos. Again, we've kind of concentrated in and around the military bases, Columbia, South Carolina, Columbus, Georgia, some of those areas, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. But if anyone is interested, especially military folks, we love working with veterans, but anybody who's interested in getting into real estate, you can find us at www.patriotfamilyhomes. That is with an S right there. Or feel free to engage with me at peter.shull, SHULL, at patriotfamilyhomes.com, or even you could, give me a call at 423-210-4431.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, I had a look at your website. Looks great. So highly recommend if you want to stay at one of their homes, patriotfamilyhomes.com is the place to be. So with that said, Peter, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
And for all the listeners, thank you for listening. And Eric and I will be back on Friday with another episode. So until then.